Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us. ESBR Boxing, we're back, myself and Paul Kelly. We are in preview mode, and we are previewing the WBC Interim World Light Heavyweight title that's taking place at the MGM Grand Garden area, Las Vegas, between David Benavidez and Oleksandr Gvozdyk. Paul, don't obviously hold me to that one, but Paul, obviously, both these guys obviously both well known in boxing circles, aren't they? Benavidez, especially as a guy with big power, 24 KOs and 28 wins, a guy who's often spoken about, obviously, of super middleweight and fighting another pound for pound, I suppose, one of the biggest names in the sport. And it's actually there, Paul, that I want to first take you up actually on this line of questioning. And I want to ask you about Canelo. You've been criticals are probably unfair. You've held Canelo to high standards, to be honest with you. Obviously, about some of the sort of accusations of malfeasance, I suppose, and some of the sort of things he gets up to outside the ring as well. So you've held him admirably in high standard. But I'm going to come to you here and say, do you think Benavidez worry to fight Canelo, next or even now? Do you think he would prevail in that fight, Paul? Do you think Benavidez will beat Canelo, yes or no?
Thanks very much for that eloquent introduction, mate. Yeah, with all due respect to Canelo, elite fighter, one of the best of our generation. Whatever you say about him, but you're right. About what I've been critical of somewhat of maybe some of the things he's been caught doing in his career. But I think David Benavidez at this moment in time is the best fighter at 168 pounds. Obviously, he's up at light heavyweight here because he can't. Canelo fight wasn't coming to fruition really, and there's nobody else really for him to fight. I don't think at super middle, so he's going up to light heavy here. But I actually do think at this stage of his career that he could beat Canelo. I think the sheer size difference for a start, 6'2", and he's a big 6'2". I reckon when he was going in the ring at 168, Benavidez, he's putting on, geez, he's going 180, 185 plus like on in the night. He is enormous. Hence why he's probably got no issue of being up at light heavyweight here. He'll definitely hold his own in terms of size as well. But the Canelo one's one I think the timing could be, timing's everything in boxing. You asked me this even 18 months ago, I would have backed Canelo to beat David Benavidez, but just the David Benavidez we've seen of late, stopping Andrade, outboxing, showing a bit more to his arsenal against Caleb Plant, David Lemieux KO, Angulo KO, the Anthony Durrell one via KO. So that's quite a good resume for someone that's only 27. As you mentioned, 28 known, 24 knockouts in their massive puncher. And yeah, I think he's all wrong for Canelo at this stage. Don't get me wrong. I don't probably wouldn't back a stoppage for Benavidez just because, Canelo's Canelo. Let's be honest. If he was to stop Canelo, that would be an enormous statement. I think it would maybe go points. Canelo's got that durability. But yeah, mate, I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion or not. I'll find out what you're saying in a second. But yeah, for me, Canelo gets beaten by David Benavidez right now. What about you?
I don't disagree, Paul. Actually, I don't disagree. I think it's like you mentioned the facets I think about are the size Benavidez as well. Obviously, like you say, he carries the weight up almost like Callum Smith, isn't it? Sort of carry go up in weight, carries the weight of light heavy, absolutely fine. And I look at him as almost like kind of obviously hits very hard, but also kind of volume punching as well. Almost like Munguia fought Canelo, but Munguia doesn't have the power with someone like Benavidez. So I see it kind of being a similar kind of fight in the sense of one person sort of go back for a counter punch, the other one sort of coming forward and pressing the action. But I see Benavidez hurting Canelo. I don't see him stopping him either, but I see it being a kind of one of those Vegas decisions where I could see Benavidez winning maybe 8 rounds, but only getting a sort of very narrow 7-6, maybe a split decision. But I could see him, causing Canelo all sorts of problems. And to be honest with you, if I was Canelo, I wouldn't take the fight at this stage of his career. I know people were saying like ducking it, but there's ducking it and then there's a stage of your career managing it cleverly. And I don't necessarily think it's a duck considering who Canelo's been in with, the guys he's fought. I think it's very sort of bold and say he's ducked him. I think it's more just sort of smart business making a decision not to actually fight him at this stage in his career, to be perfectly honest with you. So I do think I'd make Benavidez favourite in that fight where it's take place. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying totally as well. But let's touch on, I suppose, up at light heavy now. Obviously, where Benavidez is fighting his next fight. Obviously, you've got Beterbiev injured, but obviously looking to fight Bivol. Bivol obviously come off the back of that victory, the 5 versus 5, first stoppage in what was it, 6 years or something as well. I want to say if Benavidez stays up at light heavy, do you see him challenging or maybe even beating either of those champions? If not, what I'm going to do though is I'm going to say let's take British interest mainly here. Then let's put the likes Buatsi, Yard, Smith, those sort of names as well, and let's see where you think Benavidez would feature against those guys if you don't think he'd beat either Bivol or Beterbiev, please.
see, this is an interesting one for me because, as I said, size wise, he definitely holds his own. I think we're still. I think you'd be very brash to go out and say, "Oh, David Benavidez would beat Bivol Beterbiev," because we haven't actually seen him fight at 175 pounds. Yes, it's only £7 increase from super middle, but that can make all the difference. We've seen fighters move up in weight and looking at better. We've seen fighters move up or down in weight and looked a shell of themselves. So we were waiting to see, I suppose. Though unfortunately, I don't ever see those fights happening. It's particularly the Beterbiev one because I think win, lose or draw after the Bivol fight, Beterbiev will be done. He's nearing 40 now, and obviously, yeah, I don't ever see that fight happening. Really tough one to call. The Bivol one, I'd love to see, and I think that's more. Yeah, I think that could perhaps happen. I could foresee that in the future. Um, Such a tough fight to call again. Like the footwork and the boxing IQ of Bivol, I probably would have to favour over Benavidez, to be honest. Unless Benavidez found a way to get to him via stoppage, I think Bivol would maybe frustrate him and outpoint him. And just quickly on what you mentioned at the end there, as much as I've loved Callum Smith in the past, I love Buatsi. I think Anthony Yard's great. A couple of other light heavies now. Willie Hutchinson coming into the mix after that win at the 5v5. I don't see any of them beating David Benavidez, to be perfectly honest with you. I think David Benavidez would beat every single British light heavyweight. How do you see that one going against all of the Brits, and then obviously the Bivol and Beterbiev as well?
I agree with you, but I think the Beterbiev one, I'm not going to sit here and claim that Benavidez beats Beterbiev. That'd be pure violence, but I'm not going to sit here and claim it. But I also agree with you. I think Beterbiev should probably stop after Bivol. He's a massive, big injury as well now. I'd be surprised if he looks the same fighter when he comes back from that, to be perfectly honest with you. And I feel like obviously the money in the Bivol fight is huge, come back for that, but I'd be surprised if we see Pete Beterbiev again, actually, after the size of the injuries that he's had. Bivol, for me, that's a gorgeous fight. I mean, just gorgeous boxing all around. I think that's a tough fight, actually, for Bivol, considering the sort of stylistic differences. I can see Benavidez not being stopped by Bivol, but I can see him being really competitive in that fight. I think it'd be a really, really close fight, actually. I'm not saying he wins it, but I think it'd be a close fight. I think the British fights, it's tough, like you say, because I've not seen Benavidez up at light heavyweight yet. But do I see him like talent-wise and skill-wise? I see him being capable of beating all three of them, frankly. For me, the one that's interesting is someone like Yard. I feel like Yard will just throw something at it. I feel like Smith and Buatsi, like against like someone like Benavidez, will go into themselves. I really see that. I don't see him kind of like having. It's a weird thing to say about boxers, but I don't see him necessarily throwing caution to win in the same way that Anthony Yard would. I think Smith are just, again, survival mode. I think Buatsi probably similar to the same as well, and to get to the end. But I think Yard's more likely to go out on his shield if it has to happen. So I think they could also catch him maybe. But I do think that I still probably have Benavidez beating those three guys. So sitting maybe around that level. But yeah, I'm not going to say he's going to beat either Bivol or Beterbiev for Paul. Thank you very much for that summary. But unfortunately, there is now nowhere for you to hide, Paul, because we are at prediction time. Benavidez versus Gvozdyk. Well, we haven't spent too long really talking about Gvozdyk, have we, in this video? But this is your chance, Paul, to maybe express whether you think he can have some success in this fight, or whether you think Benavidez simply just runs over him and overwhelms him. What do you think, Paul? Who wins this fight? How? Why? When? Where?
I don't think he annihilates Gvozdyk. I think Gvozdyk's a massive puncher, and I'm actually commending David Benavidez for taking this for his first fight at 175 pounds. Gvozdyk's beaten the likes of Adonis Stevenson, Isaac Chilemba, Bolotnik's all by knockout. Former WBC World Light Heavyweight Champion as well. The only defeat is the Beterbiev, which was a stoppage. But he's going to have 2 stoppage defeats on his record after this weekend, mate. I think the timing's all right here again. There's 10 years between them. And although Gvozdyk's come back, I think he's not the same fighter as he was pre-Beterbiev. And I could see David Benavidez putting in another stellar performance. I'm going to go a stoppage. I'm going to go round 7, 8, 9 for Benavidez. But yeah, I think this again will show just how good David Benavidez is. What about you?
Yeah, you know what, I think Benavidez is going to have too much for this. I think people will think I've worked on this, but I haven't. But because obviously, his nickname is the Nail, and I see him getting hammered by Benavidez, Paul, when this fight takes place, mate. I think he's going to get hammered into a stoppage, and I think it's going to be. I actually get a similar round range to you, to be honest with you. I think second half of the fight, I think somewhere maybe around sort of 8, 9, 10. I can see a stop. I see him catching him, overwhelming him, frankly, and stopping him. So yeah, I think we're both with the Benavidez KO. Which I'm delighted with, and Paul, I think I suppose people can really leave it in the comments whether they agree or disagree with this, whether they see this maybe as being a harder fight as we're giving it actually, and whether how they see Benavidez competing up against those other champions at light heavyweight or against those sort of British interests as well. It'd be good to know in the comments what people think of those. Paul, thank you very much for joining me, guys. Check out the channel. Obviously, we've got other previews and reviews coming from this event, interviews with fighters, big fight breakdowns of everything that's taking place on the card. Check out those and check out obviously some of the other content we've got on the channel. Like and subscribe. Paul, I've said it twice. I'm going to say it a third time, baby. Thank you very much for joining me. And guys, as always, thank you very much for watching.